Hello, my name is Todd Miranda, and the purpose of this presentation is to demonstrate how to create styles in WPF applications. Let's begin by creating a new WPF application project. We'll call this Apply Styles. You can think of styles similarly to styles in a cascading style sheet page used in HTML or ASP.NET. We can create styles for our elements. We can create those styles inline. We can also create those styles in a shared resource area, much like a cascading style sheet that you could include in your HTML page. So let's begin by using a stack panel. Stack panels are just such easy elements to use for demos. And we're going to create a couple of simple elements. We'll create a text box with some text in it, and we'll create a button. Let's set our horizontal alignment on our button to be centered so that it doesn't stretch all the way across. And I'll tell you what, we'll go ahead and set the horizontal alignment on our text block so that it'll center as well. Now, just with these two elements and no other styles, let's take a look at what this looks like in a window. So here's our button with our standard gray background, and here's our text block right above it, both centered. So let's start with what we know. We know that we can set the margin of an element, and we know that we can set the background of an element, and we'll set this to black, and we'll set the foreground to white, and we'll set the font size to something big and easy to read. Likewise, in our button, we know that we can set the background of our button to a color directly in line, and we can set its margin as well. So let's take a look at the changes visually that these elements made, inline elements, inside of our text block and button controls. So you see that our text block now has a black background, white text, and our button has a blue background. Well, you can immediately see that this gets very messy if we have many properties that we want to set here. Now granted, we can put these on multiple lines if we want to do this and break it up so that it's a little bit easier to read, but there's even a better way to do this. There's a better way to set what we're going to call our styles on our elements, and that's by using styles and creating style blocks. So let's begin by setting the text block style to a value, and that value has to be a style or a style block in this case. And within our styles, we use setter elements in order to set certain properties. So we're going to create a setter, and we specify that the setter has a property of background, and we specify its value of black. Now, since our style is unaware of what type of element it might be styling, some elements do not have, some controls do not have a background property. So we have to specify that this is the text block background property that we want to set. And let's set another property. We'll set the margin. So you can see that the values that we can set using setter blocks do not have to be just colors and font sizes. It can be any of the elements that affect how a control looks. Let's go ahead and we'll set a couple more of these. Let's set our foreground and our font size. and our font size we set to 20, and our foreground we set to white. We can also set our horizontal alignment. So let's create one more for our horizontal alignment. And its value is center. Now that we have all of these properties set in our setter blocks, specifying the type of element that we want to set those on, we can then go and remove them from the element itself as far as inline, and it really cleans up that element quite a bit. So you can see that this is much cleaner to have your control and then have its style contained all inside a block here, so we can very easily go down and read the properties and values that we're setting. Now, likewise, we can do the same exact thing in our button. So let's create a button style, and we'll use the style block, and we'll set property of margin to be the same margin values that we used inline, and we'll set our other properties here as well. Remember that this is now a button element, so we're going to specify that it's the button margin and the button background and the button horizontal alignment that we want to set, and the background here was aqua, and our horizontal alignment was center. And as we did with our text block, we can now remove the elements in line. Now let's make one additional change to our button style, because we don't have to necessarily use the attribute syntax. We can use element syntax as well. So let's change our background, and let's use element syntax to set its value. And we'll set this to a linear gradient brush. We'll set the start point to 0, 0 and the end point to 0, 1. And we'll add just a couple of gradient stops in here. We'll make the first one something easy to see. And we'll just set this to the 1 offset, and we'll set it to something very drastically different like red. Okay. Let's build our solution and see what it looks like. So as you can see, we've got the same black background, white font that we do with our text block. We just simply moved those styles from the inline of the text block into a style block here. And in our button, we've got the same look and feel, except we changed our background to a gradient. But notice that we just moved all of our style elements into our style block and used these setter blocks to set that. Now, you can easily see again that while this is much cleaner than having everything inline in our elements, you can see that it might be very difficult to look down through our page if we have styles mixed in with our elements. So we can move these style blocks into a resources area and then reference those resources within our text block element. Let's see how we do that. The first thing that we're going to want to do is create a resources area in our window. So let's create a window.resources, and within the window.resources we're going to create a style block, and we're going to give the style a key. We'll call this my text style. Now, as opposed to typing all this over again, we can cut all those setter elements that we had below and specify them up above. And get rid of our style block. And this time we can simply say that style equals static resources and specify the name of our resource, my text style. And we can do the same thing with our style for our button. We'll call that button style. We can check these setter elements and copy them up to our style block. Get rid of our style block here and set style equal to static resource button style. And that's static resource, not static resources. So now what we've done is we've taken our style blocks, we moved them up into a resources section, we've given them a key value that we can use to reference them later. So we've effectively contained these styles now in a more central location. And then down below we simply reference those styles as the style property of our elements. So let's take a look at that. And there you can see that we've got the same style, no effect. Everything looks exactly the same as it did before, except now we've taken our styles, we've consolidated them up at the top of the page in a window.resources section. We can also move these into our app.resources so that they'd be available to all the windows that are in our application. And it's considerably cleaned up our actual window code for our controls. So this is how we can create styles, set our properties that we would like in our style blocks, and then consolidate our style blocks into resources sections so that they can be more easily referenced in the code and make everything a lot cleaner.